It started like any other quiet afternoon in the pediatric ward. Soft beeps from the heart monitors, sunlight cutting sharp lines across the white linoleum, the low murmur of nurses exchanging shift notes. In room 312, a frail boy lay swaddled in hospital sheets, his breathing shallow but determined. He was barely 12, skin pale from months of battling an illness that doctors now described in hushed tones, their faces wearing that careful mask of compassion and inevitability. His parents stood on either side of the bed, clutching his hands as if they could hold him to this world by sheer willpower alone. He knew the truth, though this was his final goodbye. Yet, no one in that room, not even the doctors with all their charts and prognosis graphs, could have predicted that this moment was about to collide with the kind of story people whisper about for decades. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The door burst open so suddenly that the oxygen tubes rattled against their stands. In strode Denzel Washington. Not the Hollywood star you've seen on red carpets and late-night talk shows, but something sharper, heavier, more dangerous. His presence filled the room like a pressure drop before a storm. He wasn't smiling, and his eyes scanned every corner like a man stepping into hostile territory. He didn't greet anyone, didn't explain himself. He went straight to the boy's bedside. The stunned parents could barely form words before he leaned over the child, studying his face with an intensity that felt almost clinical. Then, in a voice low enough for only those nearby to hear, he said the words that would rip apart everything they thought they knew. He's the key to humanity's survival. The room went still. The boy blinked up at him, too weak to speak, but his eyes flickered with confusion and maybe, just maybe, recognition. The parents exchanged baffled looks, but Denzel was already moving, pulling a slim, black device from his jacket and scanning it over the child's arm. A soft chime confirmed something only he seemed to understand. Then he turned to the others, his tone clipped, urgent, leaving no room for debate. "There's a plague coming," he said. "And this boy carries the one thing that can stop it." It sounded insane. It sounded like a bad sci-fi script. And yet, there was something about the way he said it, like he wasn't trying to convince them, just inform them, that made everyone's stomach drop. That's when chaos erupted. The head nurse rushed in, demanding to know who he was and what he thought he was doing. Security was called over the intercom, their heavy boots already pounding down the hallway. But Denzel wasn't waiting around for explanations. In one swift, practiced motion, he disconnected the boy's four, scooped him up, monitors shrieking in protest, and started for the door. The mother lunged to stop him, her hands clutching at his sleeve, but he shook her off with a look that somehow said both trust me and don't get in my way. The father shouted for help, for someone to stop this man. But the kid didn't resist. Even in his weakened state, there was something like relief in his expression, as if deep down he'd been waiting for this moment. The hospital's front doors burst open as Denzel carried the boy into the blinding daylight. A black SUV screeched up to the curb, doors already flung wide. Two more men in dark tactical gear spilled out, one taking position with a rifle slung over his shoulder, the other yanking open the back seat. They moved with the precision of people who had done this before, who were prepared for every possible scenario. Horns blared from angry drivers caught behind the SUV, but inside the bubble of urgency, none of it mattered. Denzel slid into the back with the boy, cradling him like something fragile but essential, while the vehicle peeled away with a squeal of tires. Back in the hospital, confusion had mutated into panic. Security guards shouted into radios, trying to coordinate a chase, while doctors scrambled to figure out what could possibly make this child so important. All they had were rumors, whispers about a new pathogen in isolated regions, reports of government labs working round the clock on something classified, and now this, an A-list actor who apparently wasn't just an actor, kidnapping a dying kid in broad daylight. Outside, the SUV wove through traffic like it owned the road, heading for somewhere far beyond the reach of ordinary rules. Inside the vehicle, the boy's voice was barely audible. "Am I going to die?" he asked, each word a small effort. Denzel looked down at him, his jaw tightening. "Not if I can help it," he said, but there was a heaviness in his tone that made it clear the road ahead wouldn't be simple. He explained, in clipped bursts between glances out the tinted windows, that the boy's blood carried a genetic mutation, something no one else on record had. It wasn't just resistance to the disease. It was a complete immunity, the kind of immunity scientists could turn into a cure if they had enough time. But time was the one thing they didn't have. The plague was spreading faster than the public knew, and if certain people got to the boy first, they'd lock him away in a lab or worse, let him die so the cure never saw daylight. The boy listened, eyes wide, trying to process the idea that his body could save billions of people. It didn't make the weakness in his muscles vanish, didn't erase the pain in his chest, but it gave him something else. Purpose. For the first time in months, he felt like he was more than just a patient waiting for the inevitable. Yet that purpose came with a shadow. He could see it in Denzel's eyes when he thought the kid wasn't looking, that flicker of worry, of calculations being made in real time. Because saving humanity might cost this boy his life, and Denzel knew it. They drove for hours, leaving the city behind, cutting through back roads lined with skeletal trees. Every so often, another black SUV would appear in the distance, forcing their driver to take sharper turns and riskier shortcuts. Denzel never let go of the boy's hand, as if grounding him to the here and now was as important as keeping him breathing. Eventually, they reached a fortified compound tucked into the hills, where a steel gate slid open at their approach. Inside, a team in white lab coats and body armor was already waiting. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and something metallic. Blood, maybe, or the memory of it. Denzel carried the boy straight into a glass-walled lab, where machines hummed softly and screens flickered with streams of genetic data. A lead scientist stepped forward, her expression a mix of awe and urgency. "You actually found him," she said, as if she doubted it was possible. "We don't have long." She began issuing orders to her team, preparing equipment that looked equal parts medical and experimental. The boy's parents weren't there to protest, and maybe that was intentional. This was no place for hesitation or moral debates. This was a race against something unseen but closing in fast. The boy was laid out on a specialized bed, sensors attached to his skin, his blood drawn into vials that disappeared into machines with soft clicks. He winced but didn't flinch, watching Denzel from across the room, as if the man's steady presence was the only anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Outside, the compound's alarms blared. Someone had found them. Denzel's head snapped toward the door, and in that instant, the boy realized something. His survival wasn't just about science. It was about staying alive long enough for that science to work. And there were people out there who would rather see the world burn than let that happen. The coming hours would decide everything, not just for the boy, but for everyone breathing on the planet. And as Denzel checked the magazine in his weapon and moved to guard the lab's only entrance, the kid understood the weight of the moment. This wasn't about being a patient anymore. This was about